Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the Islamic Vs Podcast. I'm your host Majid, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Brother Rash, Brother JK, and Brother Afi. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. How are you doing?
Walaikum assalam.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I hope everyone's well and enjoying the first few days of the blessed month of Ramadan. Before I come to you guys, I just want to mention a couple of things. Firstly, to our listeners, it's been about a month, if not probably a bit longer, since the last episode was released. We've not given up. I was away on holiday, and when I returned, I've not been well. So that's the reason why. But inshallah ta'ala, we're up and running now. And hopefully we'll have these back on, maybe inshallah fortnightly or whenever we can. But the brothers, whenever they're there, I know they're willing. And if there's a will, there's a way. That's the right way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, guys, it's Ramadan, and whether people talk about the moon or not, the fact that three of us are wearing thobes indicates that it's definitely Ramadan. Afi is the odd one out here. But how are you guys doing? How are you guys finding the first couple of days of Ramadan?
Yeah, it's been fine actually. Yeah, no, I don't know if I haven't done it as much in previous years, but this year I tried to do a few more fasts during Shaban, and I think that's helped in making, like, certainly yesterday and then so far today, been absolutely fine. But alhamdulillah, we're fortunate, aren't we? Because the weather's not too hot, where we do jobs that you sit in front of computers and things like that. The people who have to go out there and do manual work in hot countries, they clearly have it a lot more difficult. But alhamdulillah, it's been fine, been easy up to now. I know it's only been a couple of days.
Yeah, no, exactly, bro. But the thing is, to be honest with you, you say what you have, but if you spoke to someone who does manual labor, he'd actually say something similar. I mean, remember last year? I'm sure it was last year, Paul Pogba, when they asked him about how do you do it, and he just said Allah gives us strength. So because obviously I was in Pakistan a few weeks ago, and there basically I know people, I met people who never miss a fast. And they're like builders. Basically, they have to, they don't have the luxury of taking day offs, right? So exactly. They're out there and they're working in the heat, and they just do it. It's just it's amazing. So you're right. We've got it easier in that respect, but there's something about this blessed month which makes it easy for people no matter what they're doing. JK, what are you saying, bro?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. It's been good, isn't it? It's one of these times of the year that everyone looks forward to. I mean, for non-Muslims, when you speak to them, they're a little bit like, well, how can you look forward to this month of not eating? But no, I mean, generally it's not about that, is it? It's really very communal. Everyone's on a bit of a hype, really positive, blessed hype, which is really good. Everyone really wants to talk about Islam. There's a communal aspect to everything. And this year actually has been really good that, I mean, last year, I think we were going to Taraweeh and Jama'ah, but there was still a bit of social distancing going on. So this year, it's really good to kind of be, shrug shoulders with fellow brothers. So, alhamdulillah, enjoying it so far, and just, pray that Allah accepts it from all of us.
Amen.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about the non-Muslim element to it, because even when I've been chatting on Teams with some guys from work, and I'm telling them about Ramadan coming up, and it's weird because I'm trying to show like how excited I am, but from their point of view, it's like I'm not really selling it, because it's like it's them is the case, like, yeah, look, you got to do what you got to do, I mean, respect.
Yeah.
But it's like you to say, listen, this is the best time of the year, this is the best month of the year. It's a hard sell because they just can't see it in that respect.
Exactly.
But you mentioned the stuff about the mosque and stuff, and we know that there's always going to be issues to do with moon sighting and when people start and stuff like that. But nevertheless, I mean, this is something which I know we all experience, but me and Afi have experienced it together, especially when we've been on Umrah together in Ramadan. and that sense of unity that you get in this month of Ramadan. And it's like linked to what you were saying, JK, that feeling of brotherhood, that feeling everybody wants to speak about Islam and stuff like that. It's not there, for the rest of the months. You will see it in the month of Ramadan, and this is something which, even though there are obstacles, and even though I think personally, people do use it to their pleasure to try to make jokes like, so when are you guys doing Eid today? I'm talking about from like a non-Muslim point of view. Sometimes you see that like you guys can't even unite on a particular day to do a certain thing. How are you gonna unite on bigger issues? However, other than a few issues which we can speak about it later on, which I think are political matters, in all honesty, I still sense a lot of unity in the Ummah in Ramadan. And to me, that's like one of the favorite aspects of Ramadan for me. Afi, I'm sure that's going to be one of your favorite aspects of Ramadan as well.
I was going to actually say that is what becomes more evident. I think the unity is there at the rest of the year. I think it's just not as obvious because people aren't praying together at the same times, or that divide that they want to create with the worldly things, and that's something that brings people together like a prayer would do. Outside of the prayer, they don't have that feeling, and people go and live their normal lives, whereas Ramadan is just going to be a constant for 30 days, 29, 30 days. So I think Ramadan just brings it to the forefront more and just makes it more evident for people to talk about, whereas throughout the year that distraction is not there. And I think it is a funny one. And like you guys are saying that about the non-Muslims can't relate to it. No one except Muslims will be able to understand this, because this is something that comes from our belief. You have to be Muslim, or how can you give people the benefits and how you enjoy staying up late, waking up early, not eating, not drinking, spending all day in prayer. Exactly. How can you explain the benefits and how that brings you pleasure to someone who's not Muslim? And you can't. And I draw parallels with something that a non-Muslim asked me once. He goes, you could be a friend with a non-Muslim for years, but you meet a Muslim who you've never seen before, and automatically you've got a strong bond with him. Why is that? And I was like, can't explain it to you. And it's the same thing with Ramadan. We can't explain it. We just got it because it's a result of the belief that we have.
Yeah. Can I just add to that as well? Like, with non-Muslims, what they can relate to is something that brings them pleasure is making money, right? So even if it is a hard slog to work and you got your hustle, they enjoy the hustle at this time. They enjoy the hustle because it gets them the objective and the reward they're looking for, which is material wealth. And I think with Ramadan, look, this is the mentality of a Muslim every year round, but like Afi's saying, that brings to light in Ramadan that you genuinely are doing things for the pleasure of Allah. And it just goes back to, you feel like you're achieving your purpose of why you're here, which is, as Allah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that He did not create man or jinn except to worship Him. So when you're doing those actions, regardless of how difficult it may be physically, from a body perspective, you don't view it like that, because actually you're doing it for the pleasure of Allah. You're doing it for the pleasure of your Creator. And that, I think that's what really kind of makes it real. And like I said, you do it all year round, and you pray that every action you do is for the pleasure of Allah. But Ramadan just brings it to life, and there's opportunities to do it more in Ramadan, I think. And not only that, the reward is is maximized as well in Ramadan. So you do it for the pleasure of Allah, but knowing that Allah will reward you even greater because of the blessed status of the month. But yeah, as Afi's saying, really, I think that's why we get so excited over this month every year.
I like the way that Majid put it, actually. The sell, it's actually quite a hard sell, isn't it? Because if you start, I really like that analogy, because if you try and sell it to a non-Muslim that, oh yeah, we wake up really, we have to wake up in the middle of the night, put an alarm on at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and you're like, half asleep, trying to eat, trying to drink. Then you have to stand all these long hours in Taraweeh. You have to go without food all day and water. They're like, how can you even contemplate being excited about that? But we are every year.
And it's worth not mentioning the fact that before you get up, your wife's up to make the suhoor, and she's there making the iftar. Because if you mentioned that on top of this, this is going to be how, yes, we knew Islam subjugates the women, right? Tortures the women. You know what I mean? But they won't understand that, innit?
Exactly.
But that's also the link. I mean, from what JK said, and there's a message I posted on TikTok yesterday, which is something I was thinking about, because you speak to a lot of people, and the Ramadan has become about food. It's become about food. So what I've tried to do in the past is, especially since the last few years, we've been keeping really long fasts, is that try to reflect on when you're fasting rather than after iftar, because to a lot of people Ramadan really is the iftari and after. However, all that time when you're abstaining from doing those things which are perfectly normal and allowed for you throughout the year, right? You're abstaining from those things which your body requires, because you have to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us in as certain needs. One of those is, for example, an organic need to eat, right? For energy to live, right? So here what you're doing is that you are deliberately, you are abstaining from eating, right? Which is then turning out, producing hunger, producing tiredness. Why are you doing this? This is the time. So for me, a lot of the buzz of Ramadan is the iftar and after the tarawih and stuff, but actually the main point is during the hours when you're actually fasting. That's the main bit, and I think that's something which I'm trying to get into the kids. It's difficult because it is about what you're going to eat. And one quick thing I want to mention is that there's a message that local masjid the imam was talking about, and he had to kind of apologize because maybe you could see people throwing daggers at him. Yeah, but he said, why don't, for example, in Ramadan, why is it that we want every iftar to be like an Eid feast, right? Because there's a couple of things here. First of all, that becomes like the goal of what I'm going to have tonight. Secondly, the people who are going to prepare this food, right? Whilst that time between Asr and Maghrib is where we're probably recording podcasts, doing all this other stuff, reading Quran, right? Even though there's a reward in it from the women's point of view, but they're doing the cooking, right? And what he was saying is that why cannot people not just eat what they usually eat? And I was actually thinking about that. If you downscale that a little, then that element of looking forward to it so much because you got this new food that you normally don't have, that sort of would be downplayed a bit, and you could probably concentrate more on the fasting element. It's difficult to try to get across, but I think that is quite important though.
It is really important. On my khutbah yesterday, I mentioned, the sermon the Prophet ﷺ gave in the last day of Shaban, prior to Ramadan. It was a Friday as well. In the middle of that sermon, he says something really profound. He says that your soul depends on your good deeds. Yeah. So if you relate that specifically to Ramadan, when we food distracts, you notice it in Ramadan the most. You feel like you have more time because otherwise food is distracting you. You wake up in the morning, you think I need to have some breakfast. Later on you're thinking, oh, I'm working towards lunch. Then it's like, oh, okay, I've got to prepare food for dinner and then have dinner and all of those things. So food is this constant throughout the day. As soon as you take the food and drink element out there's that element of time opens up, and then this concept of feeding the soul, all of a sudden you have more time to feed the soul. Okay, your material body is hungry and your material body needs food to feed it, but what the Prophet ﷺ is saying is that your soul needs feeding as well. And okay, we don't have much information about the soul, but certainly we know that when we have that link with our Creator and we feel that during Ramadan, we're feeling it because we're doing more for the soul than we are doing for our material bodies. And I reflected on it differently this year to previous years. And it really made me think because, you do feel that, that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're neglecting your body, but you are actually focusing on your soul, which the rest of the year you don't do as much. And we can't scientifically talk about the soul and things like that, but clearly you feel it. It's like the feeling of love, the feeling of these emotions. You feel them. You can't see them, but clearly when you read more Quran, you do more ibadah, you work harder for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Ramadan, you do feel that. And I think that is what is feeding the soul. And that I think that's what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is referring to.
Yeah, and if you think about going back to the purpose of Ramadan, like I said, the purpose isn't about food, and we shouldn't make it about food. And I agree with you that even relates to women as well. We shouldn't make it about them making food for iftar and suhoor. They need the time to also connect with Allah and do what pleases Allah. And like you said, it's still rewarding that, but they should also have the opportunity to do other things, and especially Quran, because Quran is the month is the Quran was revealed in this month, so it's more important that we reflect on the guidance from Allah. And just going back to what Rash said about that feeling of like you can't really explain it or describe it, but if you go back to why Ramadan, what the purpose of Ramadan is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب الصيام كما كتب عليكم من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. All you who have believed, fasting has been enjoined upon you like those before you, so that you may attain taqwa. So that's the purpose of Ramadan, isn't it? That you attain taqwa. It's not about hunger. It's not about losing weight. It's not about any other thing except for attaining taqwa. And like when there was a saying of Omar, when someone asked him, I think it was Ka'b, radiallahu anhu, asked him, what is taqwa? And Ka'b was known to be someone who was very eloquent, very profound in his words. And he said to Omar that, have you ever been down a thorny path? When you're walking down the road, you've been down a thorny path. And Omar said, yeah, I have. And he said, what did you do? He said, I walked very carefully. I lifted my garment to make sure that the thorn did not prick me. And I was very careful in how I walked down that path. And Ka'b responds, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he responds to say that this is attaining taqwa, because you're conscious of where you're walking, making sure that you're staying on the straight and narrow, staying away from the punishments of Allah, which is the analogy of being pricked by a thorn. And you're very conscious of the way you walk. And this is what taqwa means, that you're really conscious of the prohibitions that Allah has set, but also the commandments that Allah has enjoined upon us. So, and that's comprehensively, not just in our salah, in our qiyam, it's not just that, but in comprehensive life. In the ibadat and the muamalat, the worship and the transactions, we are thinking about what pleases Allah and what displeases Allah, and staying away from that. And that is the purpose of Ramadan. Ramadan will give, that consciousness comes back, the fear of Allah, which we have all year round, but in Ramadan it is heightened because we know that this is the purpose of Ramadan, to reattach ourselves to Allah and think about the things He's commanded us to do and how we go about doing that, and staying away from those things He has prohibited from us. That's how to explain that feeling, really. And like I said, it's hard to explain, but it's there. It's there when we fast and when we do Ramadan. It's there, right?
Yeah. Afi, you want to say something, bro?
Yeah, just to add to what's being said, I think, I was reflecting on this question, over the past couple of days. And I remember even when I was younger, that, you'd count down towards the end, you'd count down the days of fasting as though it's a chore. And, you enjoy Ramadan, you enjoy Eid, but you're counting down the days as though, right, it's all about hunger and this is something like really tough to do. And then as you get older, you start to reflect on this, that actually you start to yearn for the month, not its end, you're yearning for the month. And then you're actually sad as the end draws nearer, because you put it into perspective. And I think a lot of people, when you talk to them, like JK mentioned, I think for them, it is about the eating base, about sacrificing the food. But they also feel that the taqwa does increase because you see a difference in people, but they lose sight of that element of it, which is actually the purpose of the month. Yeah. And I think there's Ramadan provides an opportunity for every single Muslim, no matter how practicing you are, how bad you are, that you look forward to this, that you actually want to get closer to the Lord. You want to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everyone does it on different levels. And this is unfortunately lost, because this is the opportunity to maintain that effort that staying away from shaitan, staying away from bad that Ramadan has the opportunity to bring, because everyone refers back to the saying of, shaitan is locked up for a month, and everyone feels that closeness to Allah. But it's as though, Ramadan, the last night when we see the crescent moon for Shawwal is the finishing line, and we stop, and that opportunity for people to build on that good is lost. So I think Ramadan has become about, unfortunately, it has become about sacrificing food. Hence why people are looking forward to that good meal at the end of the day, because it's your reward for staying hungry all day. Whereas actually the reward is greater, and that's what we should look towards.
Yeah. No, you're right, bro. And inshallah, I mean, the more we speak about this, I'm sure the people are feeling it as well in this way. And, certainly with the kids and stuff, and with other people, if we're mentioning and highlighting that, what the real purpose is of Ramadan or fasting, then I think people would actually, and this might sound a bit odd, and I can't remember the actual word in English, but you have some people who enjoy pain, and you're already thinking about some weird stuff. I'm not thinking about that, but I'm just saying is like, this tiredness and this lack of sleep and this hunger, the hunger you feel, there's actually an enjoyment in that. And this is what I was saying, the fact that if you can link this to pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you are abstaining from this just to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this discomfort actually comes across as something which is enjoyment, right? There's one other point I want to mention as well.
Yeah, well, just before you mention your point, even I don't think that, I know it has probably gone a bit too far. Problem is nowadays, like, people are used to going out and getting extravagant meals, and Instagram generation is very much about going out, eating, taking pictures, blah, blah, blah. I think that's had a natural effect on Ramadan as well, because it's like you almost, if you can go out and have all these extravagant meals, you kind of sometimes expect that as part of your, opening your fast. I don't necessarily have an issue with people, we that's the reward, isn't it? It's nice to look forward to iftar, as long as you're not putting out your wives and your mothers and stuff too much. It's nice to look forward to that. But I think the focus, and this is as you get older, and as Afi said, this is important, the focus needs to be on yourself and on the people that you're influencing, to make sure that food that you have at iftar, yes, you enjoy it, yes, you are thankful for it, yes, you appreciate it, but you realize that things like you have to go to Taraweeh shortly after, and if you overeat and if you eat the wrong things, then it just affects the rest of your ibadah. So if your ibadah is the priority, you naturally will say, let's eat things that are not going to affect me negatively and affect my wife or my mother negatively, and therefore that will help me make the most of Ramadan. I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, some solid points there. And I think that the one thing that you mentioned, which is really important, is expectation. I think it's just become an expectation now. And look, at the end of the day, you don't want to complain for having nice food. It's Allah says, enjoy from what He has given you. So I think, like I said, there's got to be a balance, isn't it? As long as there's a balance, that's the best thing. But listen, I want to move on from just talking about food, because we are trying to say that's not the main purpose of Ramadan. And there's one thing I want to mention, which, and get your thoughts on really, and it's linked to the issue of unity, and the elephant in the room, which is obviously the whole moonsighting issue. And the thing is what I want to say is, in the past few years, as you guys have known, I've kind of taken a different approach when it's come down to the issue of the moonsighting, right? And in the sense, like, it's not a case of, listen, I'm right and you're wrong. It's a case of highlighting that, if we do have this issue of people doing it on different days, then this is something which is linked to a greater problem. It's linked to the fact that we don't have, a unified leadership which is going to announce this. So we're all kind of victims to the same problem, right? However, this year, I'm still, of that mindset. But what I'm also seeing is the fact that, there's a deliberate attempt to actually disunite and divide the ummah, right? And, what we need to be careful about is one thing saying that, look, I don't want to, I don't really want to debate on who's right and who's wrong, because that's not the point. However, the reality is there is a right and there's a wrong. And if you don't have a stance on things like this, right, and you just kind of allow it just because of, you don't want to argue or whatever, right, then there's a danger. And if I can sort of elaborate is, when we're talking about the issue of unity, and I mentioned before that we do see unity in the Ummah, right? Even on the issue of fasting, because, just say there's a difference at the start of Ramadan, at the end. But during Ramadan, right, you'll be with people, making iftar with people, chilling with people, praying together with people who maybe started Ramadan on a different day. It doesn't really matter, right? But the most important thing is that no matter no matter which side you're on, if you don't really want to call it sides, but which stance you take, the point is though is both parties and all the Muslims, they still believe that Muslims should start Ramadan on the same day and they should do Eid on the same day, right? And that's why you have an element of there's a right and there's a wrong. And that itself, you might find this odd for me to say this, that itself is a blessing. And why I'm saying that is because what I'm seeing is the attempt to actually take the Muslims down the road where there's going to be a time that, Muslims, for them, it will actually be, they'll be content and it'll be absolutely normal for Muslims to be doing, starting Ramadan and doing Eid on days which, whether it's linked to their locality, their chosen date, where it's actually going to be something which is normal. And to me, that's a problem, and we can't allow it to get to that state, because Ramadan it signifies unity, right? And another example is that in the days, in the old days, especially Afi will sort of relate to this because we're from a similar sort of background locally, and even from we went to the same mosques. Even then, there was an issue of the Saudi issue. There was the issue of the Wahhabi element, right? But no one ever pushed this issue of local sightings. This is a British Ramadan. This is French Ramadan. You do it in your locality, right? They never did that. There was always the issue of you're following Saudi, or did they see it, or did they not see it, or whatever. There was never this element of where this differs of opinion where, yeah, bro, you want to do it this day, you do it that day, it's completely fine. I'm going to do it this day. And I feel that that's where they're trying to take the discussion at. And Ramadan, people might not understand this, but Ramadan might be just one issue, right? But this is going to then be transferred to many other issues that affect the Ummah. So to me, my last point, and then I'll open it to you guys, is to me, the issue of moonsighting is not a fiqh issue. This is an issue of, this is a political issue here. There's actually political games being played in order to cause disunity in the ranks of the Muslims, in the ranks of the Ummah. And that's why I'm not here to discuss about the issues or the fiqh opinions and stuff like that. I'm saying we need to look beyond that, brothers, because trust me, there's going to come a time, especially where they want to now, where we will all have a different version of Islam, depending on where we are, depending what our reality is. And we will have so-called imams promoting how our ijtihad will change based on the reality we're in. I'll open the floor to you guys, bro. This is just my thoughts. I want to hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we do need to look beyond the fiqh kind of ruling. I mean, there is that perspective, and we've gone into that in the past. And everything we do obviously is based on the Sharia and what the rules are. So I'm not belittling that, but I agree with what you're saying. There's a broader point here about the political issue that's being really stoked, and that's the issue of disunity. Because as you said, I think I've even come across it recently in recent years where it's a valid view. Like before, it was a case of I'm just following my mosque. We need to keep united with the mosque. We pray there and stuff like that. And I've got a bit of sympathy for that. But now I'm hearing the view of but you're global sighting, local sighting. I'm doing local sighting, and that's valid, and they're both valid. And the reason local sighting is really pushed is that we are a local ummah in a way. They've kind of localized the ummah and split the ummah, you could argue. And what's really interesting is that they push this as unity. Even though unity is the one global ummah being united, now the language is that we want to keep a united community, so we should do it with our community, because then all the people will be united. And then you're viewed as being the one who's causing disunity because you're doing it with the global ummah. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's very dangerous. And like you said, yes, this might be an issue of Ramadan, but this is being applied to other things. So an example of that, and I'm not going to name names, but there are scholars out there and very qualified people who are pushing this view that we should view our problems and issues in the local sense. So yeah, you can give money to Yemen and Syria and Palestine, all of that, but when it comes to your problems and issues, we should think in a local way. And this scholar or imam who mentioned this was talking about, you know, the issue of Abyssinia, how the Muslims went to Abyssinia for protection, and they lived in a different land of the Muslims, and Muslims wasn't there, and they were living amongst there. In this kind of, when he's talking about that, he made this point about how the seerah itself should be viewed dependent on your circumstances, right? So we know the seerah is quite comprehensive. There's an action plan of the Messenger in terms of what he did and what he was looking to achieve for Islam. And that's quite clear, right? But what this Imam was saying is that, no, what we need to do is we need to look at the seerah and find what part of the seerah relates to us best. And then he gave the example of Abyssinia is like our situation, because we're living in the non-Muslim lands. We have to just abide by the laws and rules in this land, and don't worry too much about what's happening in other parts of the seerah, like, for example, the phase of Medina. Just take that in isolation, take the Abyssinia as your situation, and you live by that, which is really dangerous, because actually we know Abyssinia was done for a reason. It was, in the grand scheme of things, it's part of the seerah, but it wasn't an isolated event. It was part of the whole, and I don't want to go into all of it, but you know what I mean? It was, they went there to seek protection. It wasn't a permanent status. They themselves actually migrated to Medina in the end. So to talk about it in isolation was really dangerous. And it also, what it does, this really pushes this view that we can think of our situation based on our own circumstance. So going back to the point about Ramadan and moonsighting, yes, it's one issue. And like you said, it doesn't really matter in the sense that we're all fasting now and yeah, we're a couple of days out. But it has ramifications in the sense that now we're viewed as kind of local ummahs, local little communities, as opposed to one global ummah with the same issues. And we know there are countless evidences and hadith about us being one and being united, and we're one to the exclusion of all others. We don't have borders. These borders have been placed on us through the Sykes-Picot agreement that happened years and years ago and decades ago. So I agree. I think we need to really think about this from a political sense as opposed to the fiqh side of things.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think just to add to that, what you mentioned there is important, that people need to actually put effort in to look at the greater picture. I'll give you one example. So I shared, for example, on my social media, where there was just a clip from a journalist talking about how MBS is working to ban the live footage from Saudi mosques for Tarawih, right? Now people were coming on and some people were saying this is a good thing, some people saying it's a bad thing, right? But what I noticed was a lot of people were commenting, right? But without having a broader understanding of what's happening in Vision 2030, right? You could make some excuse like, yeah, maybe it's like, maybe it's disturbing people, or maybe people want privacy, right? But you can't disconnect it from when you understand what's happening in Vision 2030, you understand clearly what's happening here, right? So again, when we link it to this issue, to the moonsighting, people just really reduce it and relegate it to one day people start, another day other people start. Actually, it's bigger than that, because you got to look at what's happening in the world. You got to look at, ideas where, when we were reading the RAND report, after 9/11. There, one of the angles that it said when it broke down the different categories of Muslims, from secularists, traditionalists, extremists, fundamentalists, whatever. One of the angles that it used was that when people like secularists are speaking to the, what they call the fundamentalists, the extremists, right? They didn't stand a chance, because the one who is like the fundamentalist, right? He's always coming back from the Qur'an and Sunnah, right? So what they said is that the best people to kind of counter them would be the traditionalists. And one of the angles it said you need to use it that when you're discussing with people, you need to end the discussion of, well, that's the difference of opinion, right? And you just make difference of opinion like a difference of opinion literally on all the rules. That's not the case, because even on the matters there is difference of opinion, there's always the right opinion, right? We say, look, from our point of view, this is the strongest opinion. However, the reality is that there is always a right opinion, and the other ones are incorrect, even though if they are, if they reflect back to the Qur'an and Sunnah in some way, then it's an Islamic opinion. However, on issues that were quite clear before, where there wasn't any discussion, this angle of it's a difference of opinion or there's ikhtilaf, it actually waters it down. Now, without looking into the fact that the kuffar have been trying to reform Islam, they're pushing moderate Islam, they're trying to localize Islam. In our schools, they're teaching citizenship. They're trying to saying that we have to accept British values and all these things. Without including all of that in the discussion of local sightings versus global sightings, you're never going to be able to see the correct issue, because you're always going to really look at it from a point of, well, my dad's doing Ramadan tomorrow and I did it today. It really is going to be relegated and at a low level as that. Whilst if you're active in knowing what's happening with Prevent and all these things, you can then see how, this is a game. They're doing this deliberately to try to make us only be concerned with the issues that affect our local communities, not the issues that are linked to the Ummah. And this is, again, linked to disunity, right? Any other thoughts, guys?
It all falls into, you see, a lot of the people, I've met some of the brothers that started kind of local sighting committees and stuff like that. And nigh on everyone I've met is very sincere in what they're trying to do. They realize there's a problem. There's a local issue in that, Muslims are doing Eid and Ramadan on different days. They realize that, they understand the Sunnah is sighting, by the way, and I'm not even talking about, I think people who completely go off calculations are fringe. Yeah, so they understand, even the people that have different opinions, they understand that sighting with the naked eye or instruments, they understand that that's the priority and that's part of the Sunnah. So they go out and sight in the UK. Yeah, but even they're doing it because they're trying to solve a local problem. And they're doing it sincerely. But this, I think, it makes it more dangerous, because by doing that and by people buying into that, it takes the conversation away from the greater problem as you've described it. It takes the problem away from, we've got these ummah level issues that we've got to solve, but we've got no time for that, or that's later. Let's solve our local issues first. And that's where I think the problem arises, that then you try and solve everything locally, like JK was saying, but then there's other things, and it's not just about moonsighting. It becomes about house buying. It comes about car insurance. It comes about, what type of jobs you can have, what you can eat, if there's halal food. What you do is everything then needs like a local solution, which it does. It needs a solution, but we busy ourselves so much in those local solutions that we never get around to discussing that they're all symptoms of a greater problem. They're all symptoms of lack of unified, worldwide unity under a single leader. And it also solidifies the Sykes-Picot borders, doesn't it? All of a sudden you go, like you've already mentioned, but there's different Eids and different Ramadans in different countries, but those countries don't exist from an Islamic point of view. Those borders shouldn't be there. There shouldn't be a Jordan and a Syria and a Turkey. They should all be one. And then, okay, if people then choose to do Eid on different days, the unifying factor is the ruler says, someone's seen it here, or here, wherever. It's been seen. Their testimony is enough. They're Muslim. They've seen it. Doesn't matter if what they've seen is actually not even the moon, because it's about citing it. It's about testimony. It's about the whole concept of someone seeing it and testified to it. And then everybody does it. And that's unifying. Whereas, inshallah, when we get there, if what we've done is solidified all of these local solutions, there's going to be people who say, oh, we already have a solution for that. Why do we need a unified one? And hopefully that won't happen, because these are hopefully just fringe issues that suddenly just get fixed by a unification at a higher level, inshallah. But from a Western and from the enemies of Islam point of view, they're hoping that Muslims go, oh, I've got a house here. I've got a halal mortgage. I'm comfortable here. Oh, the Khilafah has been established somewhere. I don't want to leave. I've got the solutions to all my Islamic problems here. And that's the big problem, because it's a mindset issue, because all of a sudden people think, okay, the bigger problems don't need solving because I've solved them locally, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But just to add as well that, I'm saying even look beyond this moonsighting. I'm just talking about as a mindset, because, as Muslims, we have sources of Sharia, okay? And, we always say, don't we, Qur'an and Sunnah. Obviously, there's, Ijma, Sahaba, Qiyas and so on. But generally what we do say, oh, yes, brother, this is from the Qur'an and Sunnah. And we're very firm on that, and remember, if anything is from this, is other than this, then it's bid'ah, it's innovation. And I think what's happening is that mindset is being diluted, and issues to do with maslahah, issues to do with benefit, right? People are then, giving that more legitimacy than the Quran and Sunnah. And I'll give you a quick example. So one brother sent a link to a video by Dr. Yas Qadi. I think I've seen this video, but I'm not going to comment about the video itself. But it was about the calculation method versus the citing method, right? So I replied, I said to the brother, look, I've not really seen this video, but we know that calculations, this is something which, it's clear cut. This is something which we don't follow, right? There's not even a debate on this. This is not even like the local citing or the global citing, even though I will say this right now, that the overwhelming evidence, right, proves to global citing, right? And there may be a few people in the past who had this opinion, right? And it could be a opinion that people are rallying around. However, in the grand scheme of things, the strongest opinion is a global citing. But anyway, going back to this point. So I said, look, calculation is definitely out there. So what the brother came back, he said, look, he goes, Dr. Yasir Qadhi makes a point that even though the citing itself with the moon is the preferred, right? If it can unite the ummah, right, then calculation makes sense. So basically what I said in response was, I said, look, bro, it's not issue of what makes sense. It's the issue of what's the revelation. Because to some people, right, Juju and Majuj doesn't make sense, right? Because of science and whatever. So what we're talking about here, and this is what I'm saying, this is what I see as a worry where, the goalposts are being shifted, to things like you're saying, well, if it can unite us, then what's the harm in that, right? You understand? But the issue is more than that. It's to do with Quran and Sunnah, because as JK said, today it might be moonsighting, tomorrow it could be on other issues, could be on the rules of divorce, could be the rules of inheritance, could be, it doesn't make sense. Wouldn't it be better if it was like this, right?
Well, surely the saying of the Prophet ﷺ should be unifying. Why do we need to bring something from outside to unify us when we've got something in the Quran and Sunnah to unify us? Wouldn't it be better to unify on that?
And the thing is what I didn't say this, but what I did think was that actually, if we're talking about here where this particular person, in this case, as Dr. Yas Qadhi, that he wants a method of unifying the ummah, right? Then surely he understands that the ummah to be unified, it has to be unified under one leadership in one land, right? So shouldn't that be the priority? It's not this. If unity is the thing that concerns a person, then actually let's look at what is the unifying factor. Let's look at go back to the seerah, and a lot of these people deliver seerah. Let's go back to the seerah and let's think about it. And subhanAllah, I've just thought of an example which just came on my mind. This is not pre-scripted, right? But it really applies to this situation. Is that let's look at our situation today about what makes sense about unity and whatever, and let's go back to the time when the Messenger ﷺ passed away, and when the Quraysh, Abu Bakr and Umar, when they went to Bani Saqifa, right? And the Ansar were trying to elect a leader, right? And then someone even mentioned, look, why don't you just have one leader and we'll have one leader, right? Someone could argue that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The Ansar are more, right? They helped Islam, and the Muhajirin can have their lead as well. It makes sense for the sake of unity, because what if we don't go down that route and we have no leader, then we have no unity? It might cause issues, might cause bad blood between us. But what did the Sahaba do? What did Abu Bakr do? Right? What was their stance? That no, there can't be two leaders. Leadership, right, is unilateral, right? And they stuck to that. And then the Ansar realized, yes, they're correct, and they went with this. They gave them the bayah, right? So at that moment in time, how important was the Muslims were united under one leadership, and that even though it could have made sense, two leaderships was not a possibility. So people of knowledge know this, right? So why does it not apply to today? Why do we look at all the other possibilities of, even they may be bid'ah, calculations is bid'ah, I'm going to say as is, calculations is bid'ah, it's innovation. Why are we willing to consider an innovation for unity, right? And ignore the wahi, the actual revelation on the issue of unity? How does that make sense?
Well, isn't it automatic? You're saying that Islam cannot unify by looking to other than Islam for unity.
Exactly.
That is what you're basically saying. That whereas even just with moonsighting, the whole concept of hilal and sighting, and the fact that one sighting that is testified is binding upon the whole ummah, is a unifying concept. I mean, why do we need to look to other than Islam for unity when the concept itself in Islam is unified? What's disunited us is the fact that all the random opinions have come in, and the fact that they've tried to divide us into local communities as opposed to one ummah. That's what's caused the disunity. So why are we not trying to correct that and refer back to Islam, as you've said? Then, as the Messenger said, as Allah said, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if we differ on anything, we should refer back to the Qur'an and Sunnah, refer back to Allah and His Messenger. So it's a verse, isn't it? So again, back to, as you guys are saying, by referring to other than Islam and looking to other things like calculations, you're basically saying that Islam isn't unifying, which is a massive statement to make.
Yeah, I just want to build on that, because I was going to make a similar point. I think there's people out there who are making statements like you mentioned, Yasir Qadhi, etc., and they know that Islam is clear in this and we have to act upon this, right? But let's take people like that out of the equation for the time being and actually appreciate why they're making statements like this. I think, and it comes back down to the essence of the month of Ramadan here. People realize during the month of Ramadan, actually, this is between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I need to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I want to do good here, right? And I think here people will not take any risks, right? I think there's the issue on the start of the month, the end of the month. I think for us, it's very clear. For a lot of other people, it's very clear. For some people, it's clear-ish, but still unsure. And hence they're too scared to take that dive into do it this day or do it that day. And I know a lot of people who will fast on the first day that the Saudis do it, not knowing the real reason why this is right or wrong, because they feel uncomfortable, and they won't fast on the day that the Saudis do Eid because they don't feel comfortable with this, because they're unsure. So I think there's a lot of goodness here, and the Muslims are starting to realize that, wait a minute, this is an act of worship. I am responsible for this, and this is between me and Allah, and you can't take a gamble. You can't just take a risk based on hearsay or that guy sounds all right, so I'm going to go there. And I think people are beginning to realize this, and you can see this in a lot of people's actions, where the discussions on halal and haram, what makes it halal and haram, is this from Islam or not? These are common conversations, right? These aren't conversations that we were having 20, 30 years ago, because it was all about the Imam said this and the Imam said this. Now it's a question of halal and haram, and people have to raise their standard when it comes to the evidence. And I think people are on this journey. Unfortunately, people are now being directed back, and it's only or being pulled back. And this is only as a result of the progress the Ummah has made. So when people talk about the Ummah being a write-off, or people in the West being a write-off, this is utter rubbish. I was going to say something more harsher then, because it's only as a result of the progress that the Muslims have made, including the Muslims in the West, that there's a real drive to dilute the understanding of Islam. And that's why people like Yasir Qadhi what he has presented as a view is not from Islam, but he's presented it as though this is for Islam. It's presented as though this is based upon Islam because it's adhering to the principles of Sharia. All right, which is where people need to raise the standards. We will talk about these issues until we're blue in the face, and it won't make an iota of difference until Muslims assume that responsibility that Allah has placed upon them, that you are responsible for the actions, for your own actions. On the day of judgment, Allah is going to hold each and every one of us accountable individually. He's not going to hold us together on this podcast if we say something wrong, and inshallah we won't. But you guys were sat there together. It's going to be, Maj, you said this, Rash, you said that, JK, you said this, Aftab, you did this. This is an individual accountability. Is going to be individual on all of us. And we all need to assume that responsibility of what does it mean to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think Muslims are going down this route, but they're being diverted with local issues which are concerning them. Other issues like the cost of living is going to come into it, and it's going to be even more of a distraction. I just come back from Egypt, and their desire to live according to Islam and worship Allah is pure, 100% there. But that distraction is everyday the harshness of everyday living. And this is what it's becoming like for us. So unless we stop passing the book and allowing other people to come up with an opinion that we're going to hide behind, and actually this is going back to what made Islam great. I remember Majid's comment about making Islam great again, but what made Islam great was that the Muslims understood their responsibility. They understood what it meant to worship Allah and what accountability is going to be based upon. And then when you have this and your understanding is real, you've taken the onus on yourself to understand and want to learn, then you're in a greater position to hold people accountable when they're giving you incorrect ideas. Until this happens en masse, until we all take on this responsibility, we're going to be in the same situation.
I just want to reiterate what Afi just made. Such an important point, just especially one bit about this whole Reformation. This idea of people pushing, principles of Sharia, Maqasid al-Sharia, and talking about, the objective of Sharia is for unity. Therefore, let's use something else to gain unity. And this is very, very dangerous, and it's something some of these reformist scholars try to push. And they openly say they're reformers as well, by the way. So it's very dangerous, because what it allows to do is things like democracy, these things that we know are foreign to Islam, it allows them to come into Islam. So I think Afi's point is so critical, because this is how they get people to think, this is Islamic, but actually it's far from. Islam already has the solutions to those things. And I think Shatibi himself was saying that these are for those peripheral, the things that there can be differences of opinion in. These are for the peripheral matters. The actual objectives of Sharia are already provided by Sharia itself. You don't need to go outside to fulfill the objectives of Sharia, which is what the likes of Yasir Qadhi with this particular example is doing, and it's extremely dangerous, and I think it needs to be reiterated.
Just to add, obviously the issue of the Yasir Qadhi video, I think I've watched it. I'm going off the title, and from what the brother's response was, that he was saying that the calculation would be good if it can unify the Ummah, right? So it's not a witch hunt. And I know the brother's not saying that, but one thing I want to just add to what you just said there, Rush, is that the dangerous element is the fact that what this kind of conveys subtly is that things need to change a bit. Islam needs to, you need to consider things that are different to the different ages, right? I think that's the thing, and I think that now when you speak to a lot of people, if you're referring back to Qur'an and Sunnah, and from a 7th century point of view, if you can say that, right? It's like, yeah, but things are kind of changed, and what facilitates that are these people who have these platforms, who promote that, who give an understanding which is basically giving you more room to maneuver than you actually have. And I think that's the whatever the topic is.
Yeah, well, it's not an issue, is it? In that we know that the reality changes, but we also know that Islam can provide us solutions for those changing realities. The dangers you have here is people who portray themselves as specialists and people of knowledge are actually saying, we can take something from outside of Islam in order to help Islam. And that's what I'm just trying to highlight. And again, I'm not saying everything.
But that's what I'm saying to you. They've where what you can refer back to the Qur'an, Sunnah, etc. Right? It's so just that big, for example. Right? It's ever expanding now. It's ever expanding where new things are being brought in, whether it's to with maslahah, whether it's to with certain principles that are being introduced. Right? And the dangerous thing is, and this is where the normal person doesn't see it, and it goes back to Afi's point of view of the sincerity of the normal person, is because it's still pushed in the favor of Islam, right?
Yeah.
So from the normal point of view, it's not like they want to do something un-Islamic. So they're like, yeah, look, if this helps Muslims, if this helps the Ummah, if this helps Islam, if this shows Islam in a better light, then why not? Obviously, that guy's educated. He's saying that we probably do this. Then it makes sense again. It makes sense.
Well, there's some very reputable, leaders of our communities and mosques that are very heavily tied in with the local moonsighting committees. So we wouldn't question their intentions because of the, the amazing work that they do and what they're trying to do for the Ummah in the UK, for example. But this is not to criticize them either. It's to say that it is possible that there's an agenda, a greater agenda to cause disunity, and maybe some of them are not even aware of it.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that, well, not the only thing, because I've said many things, but as Afi said, the responsibility really falls back on us. On the day of judgment, it's going to be us being questioned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, right? He doesn't refer to the scholars or the people of knowledge. He refers to the believers, or Ya ayyuhan nas, to human beings. So we do have a level of responsibility where we need to look into. And the only thing I would say to people listening and watching this is, guys, look, we know that since the time of Adam, there's a battle between Islam and Kufr, right? We know since the time of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there's been a struggle. What's changed is the face of the enemy, whether it was the pagans of Quraysh and the Byzantiums and the Persians and the Crusaders and the Mongol, whoever, right? It's just changed. So we know this, and we also know that, look, a lot's happened since 9/11. And I'm talking about people listening, casual Muslims like us, right? We know there's an attack on Islam. We see what's happening in India. We see how they're attacking the hijab in places like India, in Europe. How what they call Islamophobia now has become normal now for people to criticize Muslims. We know this is happening. We know our children are being affected in our schools by being taught all this liberalism and stuff like that. We know all of this is happening. We know that Sykes and Picot, they drew lines in the sand and they divided us and gave us borders and gave us flags. We know this. We know our history, right? We know Shaitan. We know Iblis. When do we know Iblis to have given up or to have thought, actually, I've done enough now. I'm taking a time out. This guy's going to be constantly doing what he's doing until the day of judgment. And this is the kuffar are going to consistently do what they're doing. They're not going to give up because they divided us into certain countries. They're doing things that are global now. They're trying to divide the ummah even further in ethnic lines and sectarian lines, right? So with all this onslaught against Islam and Muslims and all this idea of the Muslims being divided along ethnic lines, along geographical lines, along sectarian lines, we know this is happening. So if we know this is happening, just for one moment, why don't we look at this issue of people saying that only be concerned about your local community or the countries you reside in, right? Do your Eid and do your Ramadan with the moon sighting in your locality. Forget about what's happening elsewhere in all the other lands, right? You are British or you are French before everything else. Look at all these issues in a collective way. When you look at it in a collective way, you will see a bigger picture that's at play. If you're only gonna see this as an issue of people start fast on one day, some people do on another day, you're never gonna see the bigger picture. And that's my only message, guys, that there's a political issue out there. This is not a fiqh issue. It's not a difference of opinion issue. Even if there is a difference of opinion, that might even be allowed. Oh, that's a minor issue here. What we're talking about is that there's a massive agenda there, guys, that if they can localize on these issues, right, they will localize on other issues. And if you want to do some reading, go and read what people like Tariq Ramadan used to write just after 9/11 about how the Europe, Islam and European Muslims, right? You look at the person, I'm not going to mention his name, but do your research and look at the person who's quite big in the New Moon Crescent organization, and you look at where he's being linked, the linkages that he has, you will see a pattern being formed. So going back to what Afi says, ignorance isn't bliss. We have a role and responsibility. And as Muslims, we need to be looking at the greater picture. And this requires effort, requires study, requires taking our deen in a serious way. Only then will you be able to appreciate the issues that we're highlighting. Otherwise, if you can't, then you'll just see it as, those guys on Islamic Vs Podcast, all they ever talk is about issues that disunite the ummah. Why don't they just shut up and just go with everyone else? Right? You won't see the bigger picture, man.
And I think, something you said really was brought to life kind of the danger in some of this, that when it came to them dividing us in the early 1900s with Sykes-Picot, it was Sykes and Picot who drew those lines. It was the kuffar. They were the kuffar. They were clear to see that they were drawing those lines. They basically forced that upon the ummah. It was Allenby who rode into Palestine and declared it. It was the kuffar. They were clear to see, right? That's one aspect, and that's dangerous enough. But now what we're seeing is that the division is being led by Muslims, right? By Muslim names. Muslim organizations are calling for this localized view of Islam, looking at our local issues, the new present society, whatever it may be. That's very dangerous, because what happens is us, and I say us, I don't mean like us as individuals, I mean it's people from amongst the ummah that are devising plans to divide the ummah or reduce the ummah into its locality so that we can assimilate and integrate into Western life. And we don't need to worry about the issues that are happening. That is far more dangerous than when the kuffar were clear to see, really clear. Sykes and Picot, people know that. People are aware that they were there to divide the Muslims, and they were blatantly there, had one aim to draw those lines on the map. But now this is so much more subtle and is being adopted and accepted by Muslims, and will have far more greater consequences in the future than Sykes and Picot had, because Sykes and Picot was easily rejected after a while because it was clear that this is led by the kuffar. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if it's very subtle, but I'd say it's far more dangerous than what we had in the past in terms of how they used to try and divide the Muslim ummah.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's worth highlighting that it might not even be intentional. So it's not, even where Muslims are involved, they might just be doing it because, they've fallen into the trap of a Western political game. So it's not that to criticize people on the basis of their actions. It's they actually might have been played, and that's what we need to make people aware of.
And I think we also need to add that even at scholarly level, people can make mistakes. All the classical scholars often said that, if you follow another opinion which is stronger than mine, follow it, because I am human, I will make a mistake. And we know that there have been historical times when out of sincerity the wrong things were done because they thought they were doing the right thing, but it was a mistake. And I think and that's probably the message that I'd like people to leave with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran very, very clearly that today I have perfected your deen. Allah is saying that it's perfected now from this point. This is at the time of revelation. Allah is saying at this point it is perfected. So there's none of this nonsense about that was then, what do we do now? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who's going to hold us accountable, like we've said, who's told us right and wrong, told us what he wants from us, says that the deen has been perfected. So all these people who are now trying to come out with a different opinion now, saying that, look, at that time they couldn't be sure about calculation when Ramadan is starting, hence why it said sighting. Or someone now is saying, look, for today's time we are going to use this for the sake of unity, etc. This is all adding to the deen after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I have perfected it. So this is the trap that people can't fall into it. If you want any confidence that you're doing the right thing, refer back to revelation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what Allah says in the Quran, or what Muhammad has ordered us, is complete. So we don't need to look for something, because whenever we have these discussions with people, what do they say? Yeah, no one argues with the evidence. They say, yeah, but this proves it for sure, or this says it for sure, or this is concrete now. No, what Allah says is concrete. And that's the essence of our belief, and we can't deviate from it. Otherwise, we've got more severe consequences on us as individuals on that day of judgment.
Yeah, but bro, the thing is it's a process, isn't it? Sometimes we might say things which might seem harsh, but look, it's warnings. Warnings are not generally nice, are they? If someone gives you a warning, something's going to happen, right? It's not generally nice. It might come across as harsh. So, like I said to you, that we're living in a time where Muslims may differ on these issues about the moon and stuff like that, right? But they still believe that, we're right and you're wrong. I the sense that we all should be doing, there is a right and wrong. I'm talking about, if we don't get our house in order, if we don't see the signs, there's going to come a time where basically it's going to be a case where it's all right to differ. And when you're talking about reforms and you're talking about reformation, this is how things are reformed, i.e. you move the goalposts. So today we're very strict on these are the, that's why the scholars, man, the usul al-fiqh, they set the parameters of what is the usul of the fiqh, so that you can't go out of those parameters, right? When you remove those parameters and it's a free for all, right? Then you see how Islam looks different. This Islam is different. That is Islam is different. And it may all be based on things which sound sincere, or based on your reality, based on your locality, or whatever. But the point is, that's where it can get to. Now, it's not at that stage now. That's what I said to you. The fact that we have a discussion where people are saying, nah, we're right and you're wrong, I would say in a way that might even be a blessing. But you can only say that when you can see what the worst case scenario is, right?
Yeah.
So that's the only thing, if it comes across as being harsh, that's not the point. It's just a warning of, look, guys, this is where it's going down, right? And if we don't put the effort into trying to understand this, then you know what? Think about your kids, man. Think about your kids. What kind of Islam you want them to have?
Yeah.
But guys, inshallah, you know what? We've spoken about a lot of things, and I just want to get your final thoughts really on generally what we've discussed, or even any final bits of advice on what to have for iftar. Now only messing, but anything you guys want to add. Rash, I'll start with you, bro.
Yeah, a couple of little things. I try and keep them short, really, is that just going back to the taqwa, that we talked about towards the beginning. I think it's really important that, yes, Ramadan is a month of ibadah, but to gain taqwa, we need to be sure that, where there's our attacks on Islam, where, the issues that the ummah is facing, if we neglect them, we have to question what our taqwa is. To enjoin the good and forbid the evil, those are obligations. I think every year I mention, remember the saying of Ibn al-Qayyim when he says Shaitan has misled most people by beautifying the performance of, voluntary acts of worship and keeping them away from the obligatory actions. You see, Shaitan's really clever. Like, he attacks people based on, what level they are. And again, I'm not saying piety necessarily, but I'm just saying what level they are in terms of their actions, And so when I mentioned this in one of my khutbahs as well, initially there was like a bit of a surprise that Shaitan can actually push you to do prayers. Yeah. So to the normal person, that's like, why is Shaitan asking me to do more prayers? Yeah, Shaitan should be making me sin. But when Shaitan realizes that if I tell this person to go and kill someone, if I tell this person to go and commit adultery, he's not going to do it. He already knows that's a sin. So actually what I'll do is I'll push this person to just focus more on voluntary stuff, and I'll get him to neglect the obligatory stuff. Then that way I can still cause issues amongst the ummah. So he attacks each person based on what level they are in terms of their actions. And I think we're in a situation that, what happens is in Ramadan, we do all of this ibadah, but we start to neglect. And all year round, really, Shaitan is attacking us to get us to do things that, might be recommended things, but ends up neglecting some of the obligations. And I think that's important first and foremost. And another one quickly, and maybe this is something that really does need another podcast, and I think it does. It's about, I think we talk about these topics, but in Ramadan, I think we need to focus on our children and our women folk as well, very importantly. The West have targeted the women. Yeah, because they're playing a long game. They realize that if we attack the women and we change their viewpoints and their thoughts, and they're the ones that are nurturing the next generation of children, then in the long term, this will affect Muslims. And in Ramadan, it's a real good opportunity for us to sit down with our children and with our wives and our parents, our mothers, and make sure some of the stuff that, we're going through and discussing, and we hear in khutbahs and in mosques, that we make sure we pass that on to our other halves and our daughters and our mothers, and because they're being bombarded from many directions, and Ramadan is a good opportunity to try and rectify some of those issues.
Yeah. No, Jazakallah, bro. Sound advice, man. Sound advice. JK?
Yeah, just building on some of what Raf was saying as well, that I think it's really important. In Ramadan, we do a lot of individual actions, a lot of ibadat, and we should. It's highly encouraged. We pray more, we do more qiraat, reading of the Qur'an and all of that, and that's really important. But I think it is really important also to highlight that Islam and Ramadan itself isn't just for that. It's not just for the Qiyam. It's not just for the individual aspects of worship. It's taqwa in itself is much greater than that. And the saying of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, where he said that taqwa is not by praying all night and fasting all day, but rather it's about abiding by the commands of Allah and staying away from his prohibitions. So I think it's really important that we don't refine Islam to just those individual aspects, and do go back and look at Islam as a comprehensive deen. And reading the Quran, reading its meaning, to understand that this is a guidance and a criterion, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it when he said, Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran, Qur'an al-Huda wal-Nisa, Qur'an al-Huda lin-Nisa wa bayyinatil min al-Huda wal-Furqan. That the month of Ramadan is the month in which we revealed the Quran as a guidance for the people and clear proofs of guidance and criterion. And when we think about guidance and criterion, the al-Huda wal-Furqan, what is that? That isn't just as our salah and our ibadat, that is essentially every aspect of our life, every action that we take. We are referring back to the Quran and the Sunnah as a khuda, as a guidance, and a criterion, as a furqan. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is that this is the month which the Quran was revealed as a guidance and a criterion, should we not also be looking at that as a guidance and a criterion, and not just as a book that we take down from the shelf on the first day of Ramadan, read all the Quran and put it back up? It's not that, right? And then the other bit is, as we're talking about some of this reformation, when it comes to the ibadat, if now there were scholars or voices out there talking about changing salah and changing it from how we pray the salah and fundamentally changing it to something that's non-Islamic, there'd be uproar. There'd be riots, right? Muslims would never, that person would be cancelled for saying such a thing, right? Yeah, they're doing things like that to the other aspects of the deen. And there isn't the same reaction. We need to be aware of it. We need to be astute and recognize that there are things that are happening to some things that are such much as fundamental as salah to the deen that are being changed and reformed. Yet we're quiet, or we're not understanding it well enough. And we're not challenging it in the same way that we challenge that. Mate, like even Taraweeh, there's arguments of 8 rakah versus 20 rakah. Things that are difference of opinion. These are matters of ikhtilaf. It's not fundamental. But you'd get Muslims having debates about what's a stronger opinion. But my point is that, look, other aspects of the deen, fundamental aspects of the deen are being attempted to be changed. And we need to have the same level of kind of reaction and same level of worry for these things happening, because they're just as fundamental as something as salah, which is obviously a fundamental aspect of the deen. So that's really my message, that we should treat Ramadan not only to do these aspects, but also understand the comprehensiveness of Islam, and recognize some of the attacks that are taking place, so that we can challenge it back and make sure it doesn't happen for our sake and for our children's sake in the future as well.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah, bro. Jazakallah. Brother Afi, anything you want to add, bro?
Yeah, no, Ramadan is a beautiful time, man, and I think everyone that you speak to, they have that desire and yearning to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously it's going to be different for different people, but that's the essence of it. I've never come across anyone who is not looking forward to Ramadan for the right reasons, despite whatever lifestyle that they're living. And just want to urge people to understand and share with others that it's not just about those spiritual actions like fasting, prayer. We have a responsibility to worship Allah in absolutely everything that we do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a complete way of life. So it's more than just staying hungry. It's more than just going to the mosque to pray Tarawih, like what JK said. And just want to add, one hadith where Muhammad said, 1 hour of contemplation is better than a night in prayer. I'm not going to compare this to a night in prayer of Laylatul Qadr or anything like that. I'm not even going to compare it to a night, but just want to highlight the emphasis on here. We will not know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do, or what my responsibility as a Muslim is, or what I'm going to do to save myself from the hellfire, unless I go and understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to me. And this is an ideal opportunity for Muslims when they're feeling that closeness to Allah, go and understand. For all of us, we all can improve our understanding in order to better ourselves as people. And that's the only message I'd give. I'd use this opportunity, and for all those people who want to have that objective of maintaining the change that they see in themselves in Ramadan, beyond Ramadan, and then it just never happens. It all comes back down to understanding. Once you understand and you firmly believe what is required, then it's hard to not do what's required.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah, bro. Just last few comments, I think built on what you guys are saying. The word that comes to mind is standards. And I think that what's actually happened is throughout the times, if we look at what's declined, one of the things is standards. And right now, what we need to do is, as Muslims, rather than think about, look for other the alternative options, or versus the actual what Islam says, right? Because we're not at that standard, is the wrong mentality. What we need to be doing is we need to be working to raise our standard. And that's why when we talk about scholars and stuff, for anyone listening who may think that, it's an attack on scholars, it's not an attack on scholars. What we're actually doing is we are speaking about them based on the standards that they have, in the sense like what they carry. They're not normal people. We have to expect better from them. So, if we're talking about people we look to for our deen, and if we understand that deen is far more than just your questions of how to make wudu and stuff like this, then we need to, raise the standards of the scholars too. Ask them questions about how we're going to solve our problems as an ummah today. Why are we doing Eid on different days or Ramadan on different days, and why can't we do this and why can't we do that? Ask those questions, because what you'll do is you'll raise their standard too. And that's what it's about. It's about raising our standard, not dropping our standard by accepting defeat that times have changed. It's better just to accept anything than nothing. That's not from the Sunnah, man. Even from the time when at the Battle of Uhud, when the news, the rumors were going around that the Messenger Sallallahu had been martyred, right? And some of the Sahaba dropped their swords. Okay, some of them wanted to give up. Like, what's the point? Until it took one companion to give a speech. Like, listen, we understand what Islam is about. The Prophet was a man. Prophets have come before and they've left. We understand what Islam is. We need to continue this mission. So they didn't drop their standards because of just accepting defeat at that moment. So we shouldn't do the same. We shouldn't just accept any option out there because it's our best option at this moment. No, if Allah's only given us, point A, and that's it, if we can't carry out point A, then we need to strive to get to that stage when we can, not then make up B and C and option D and option E. This is not on the table, right? So that's just really the point, that our first and foremost piece of advice to myself, and first and foremost, and then to everyone out there really. And Jazakallah khair, guys, for your time, and also the words of wisdom and your experiences that you've shared. Really, I hope that the people listening will benefit from it. Certainly, because it's quite a long episode, it will definitely take out an hour and a half of your fast anyway. So you'll benefit. So you'll benefit in one way, but I'm sure you'll benefit from. I benefited just by being in the virtual company of my brothers and speaking about the Deen of Islam, and I'm sure you guys will as well. And if you found the content beneficial, then please share it with your family and friends. And as you know, the podcast is available on the Islamic Vibes podcast on all popular podcast platforms, and also on my YouTube channel, Path to Revival. On that note, guys, Jazakallah khair for joining me on the podcast. And inshallah ta'ala, as always, we'll see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.